Yeah, that's what I was gonna jump into first. Is like I kind of like to see like what the developers are trying to look at or give you like kind of like a basis for you to work with and to kind of understand like, oh, this works. Okay, so what can I do off of this instead? Can I do a heavy? Can I do, what can I juggle off of this? Those kind of situations.
Yeah, like I may never play Dawson ever, but I would like to see how Dawson combos works in trial mode and see like how he moves and feels because you never know, like especially with competitive players, um, you might just find somebody you like just really randomly because
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I like the way this character feels just off of the combos alone, and sometimes you can pick them up that way too.
Hello, and welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast.
Yes, welcome. This is episode 42. My name is Benny, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John, who I think is feeling like it's Christmas right now because we are on the eve of the Street Fighter 6 launch tomorrow.
We are. It's Launch Eve.
Launch Eve?
Yeah. There's a lot I think I would want to say about the launch, but maybe we should bring on our guest real quick and we can all just opine on it together. Sound good?
Yeah, sound good. Who do we got on today?
We have the one, the only, the muted NinjaNam. What's up, Nam?
Hey guys, how's it going? It's going good. I this week is definitely one for the books. I'll tell you that much.
Oh yeah?
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, with everything that's going on, Street Fighter 6 is being released. I think a lot of people are gonna jump on that. In other games, if you like Diablo 4, there's that too.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
apparently tomorrow, Yipes and T-Pain are showing off Street Fighter 6. I think that's pretty
Oh,
insane.
Yipes and
Yeah,
T-Pain?
yeah,
Really?
T-Pain. Yeah, that's
I did not
tomorrow.
hear about that. That's
So it
awesome.
just got announced like an hour ago or something, 7 p.m. PST. So you have time, check that out.
Oh
Wow.
wow. Yeah, that's big for the casuals because like I think that's a real big thing now with the launches. Like, compared to Street Fighter 5, that was a really bare bones launch. I remember like telling my friends, like they'd be like, "Should I get Street Fighter 5?" I was like, "Unless you plan to play competitively or with friends, I would say no." And they'd be like, "Why?" I was like, "Because there's nothing else there." And this is a complete like 180 from the Street Fighter 5 launch in terms of content. So it's
We
really
did
cool.
get Lupe Fiasco for Street Fighter 5.
Oh yeah,
There's
yeah,
that at
that's true.
least. Where Daigo threw that match. And then yeah, no, I agree. It's night and day. There's like I'm getting like friends and coworkers texting me, like being
Oh
like,
really?
"Hey, I'm gonna pick up six. Is it any good?" And like people that don't play fighting games are like it's entered. I think the pop culture zeitgeist, which is
Uh,
I don't see that often.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, it'd basically be like a rebirth because I mean, Street Fighter 2 was a huge phenomenon when I was growing up. So,
Yeah,
to get to the sixth iteration and, all of a sudden we have Lil Wayne that's been promoting it, who's big with the casuals, and now, Nam was just talking about that he's pairing up with T Pain, and like
yeah.
T Pain hasn't really been super relevant in the last few years, but I mean, still, it's somebody that somebody's like, oh, I know who that is, or I've heard a song with that guy. Like, what's
I mean
going on with this?
that's basically Street Fighter, right? Hasn't been relevant in a few years, but hey, I remember that
Yeah.
from when I was younger and everything
Yeah.
was auto tuned.
Yeah, that's true because I had some friends like I was playing and then they were just like I didn't even know Street Fighter was still a thing and I'm just like yeah man we're still going.
Yeah, 6 is definitely pretty big. I think Capcom is really pushing for the whole like hip hop and rap uh, culture. So they're definitely trying to hit up all the artists and make sure that they really promote it. And honestly, I don't know if you just saw as well. I think Metacritic came out with the scores,
Hmm.
and supposedly Street Fighter 6 has the highest rating of all time for any fighting games, besides Smash Brothers Ultimate.
That's awesome. Like
Yeah,
that's I last I checked, it was like a 92 or something, right?
Yeah, that's what I saw. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
I admittedly got a little bit emotional when I read that because again, my experience with the launch was 5, and you know I really liked 5, but I think I was like one of the few people on the planet that liked 5 even at that time. And so now, like, you know, I'd kind of gotten braced. I had braced myself for like the backlash to 6 and waiting for that one shoe to drop. And like we'll probably get into it on this show. There's a couple like concerns that I have about the game now, but it's really nice to be excited for something that everybody else is excited for, and people like the thing that I like in the game that I want to play. So I'm super like like I was like in bed reading that Metacritic score, and I was just like, I got a little choked up. I'm like, oh my god, it's actually happening! Like this is actually going to turn out the way that I wanted 5 to turn out.
Yeah.
It's really nice because like I feel like I'm sure you could relate, John, or even Benny. Like Street Fighter 4 was the game that got a lot of us in, hence the 09ers. I think that while Street Fighter 5 may have had that impact, I don't think it's gonna have the same impact like 6. So now you're gonna have the 23ers or whatever you want to call them. It's gonna be probably the biggest wave of newest fighting game players yet, probably.
Yeah. It's going to be augmented too by the fact that, like, you know, we haven't, at least in Arizona, I don't believe that we've fully come back from the pandemic yet. And like, there's a lot of people that I think were part of the scene that still haven't come out and played in a long time. And so like, I feel like it's not just going to be 2023 people joining in 2023, but like from 2020 to now, like there's a whole group of people that are a part of the fighting game community that have only an online presence, really. And Street Fighter 6, I think, is going to be the first big launch. No, Guilty Gear, actually. Guilty Gear Strive launched during the pandemic, too. But that was the thing, is it like scooped up a bunch of new people, really, that just had no presence offline ever. And so we're like 3 years later, we've got a whole buildup of newbies, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah. Then the other thing, like, in the last few years, there's been a lot of Street Fighter crossover in terms of other games. You know, Monster Hunter appearances. Yeah. There was, you know, the characters were in Fortnite. So, you know, originally it was like Ryu and Chun-Li, and then I think Guile made an appearance in Cammy. So they've been in the mainstream eye in various ways. I mean, again, like, I'm not looking forward to the guy to be like, hey, this is that guy with the gi from Fortnite. I'll be like, no, bro. Like, this guy's like 25 years old. He's like 30 years old. Come on, man.
I have a kind of cynical view of a lot of those crossovers. I think a lot of it is like planting seeds. You have, like, as an example, right? Like in the 80s, everybody loved Transformers and G.I. Joe and whatnot were a giant commercial for toys, right? And so it had the budget for that. Transformers was a janky looking ass show. And then, you know, those kids that loved that growing up are like, you know, they're in their 30s when, or 20s or 30s when the movie comes out, Michael Bay movie comes out, and it's millions and millions of dollars on the line all of a sudden on this franchise or this IP, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is then you need to keep planting new seeds for new generations, because eventually those Transformers guys aged out, you know, and now they're making Beast Wars. Now they're making a Beast Wars movie, right? Kind of.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's the latest Transformers.
Oh man,
I like Beast Wars too. That's what's that was my generation. Yeah, Rat Trap is sick. The wisecracker. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
remember my little cousin watching that.
So I think Capcom, like, they realized that, you know, the brand had kind of, the brand was still big for people our age, and the hardcore competitive fighting game community and everything. But like new kids, like young kids in the 2000s or any like Zoomers and stuff, like they don't have that same nostalgia driven. Like they're not going to be affected by the eight World Warriors and Street Fighter 6. Really, they're just more characters. So I feel like they were like, we need to go after Fortnite, and we need to put those characters in Fortnite. And capture the kids. How do I reach these kids?
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Transformers because like I remember there was a lot of discourse with that, and people saying, "Oh, you ruined my childhood" and this and that. And I think I don't know. There's a lot of other parallels and other things that I see, whether it's like sports and like new logos and stuff, and like older guys just being like, "I don't like this logo. This isn't my logo, or these aren't, this isn't my design," kind of thing, right? And I think, me being one of the older guys in like the fighting game scene, it's like I don't really have that kind of view when it comes to Street Fighter and stuff, and or even other fighting games like yeah, the older games had their time and they had things that were fun about them or broken or whatever. But I don't hold this kind of like, well, this isn't Street Fighter 2. This isn't Street Fighter 4. Like I've kind of just jumped in and been like, this is its own game and I'm gonna take it for what it is. And I'm not gonna let it ruin my experience if I don't necessarily agree with something, you know what I mean?
Hmm, I get you.
Mm.
How about you, Nam? Do you have any attachment to the brand? Are you looking for like any kind of legacy uh, trends in the new Street Fighter that you would hope that stuck around?
Um, I'm not sure. I'm just excited that a new game is out because I haven't been playing fighting games for a while. I haven't really been practicing or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I think the only thing that I'm looking for is just this might be too much to ask, offline locals to come back. But I think that's obviously dependent on a lot of situations. But I think that's kind of the biggest reason that I even joined the fighting game community to begin with, which was that I saw Street Fighter 4 come out, and I was a stream monster, and I was a big stream monster, and then I mustered up the courage to go to offline events, and that's when I met you guys too. So I'm really hoping that I could reconnect, or at least make new connections with the new
Yeah.
game and such. So.
Make new connections, rekindle old ones. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, there's a lot of people I haven't seen in a while. Like, yeah, so it's definitely something I'm kind of looking forward to. Also, like, we have this launch tournament locally that's on Friday, and I was kind of up in the air whether I'm going to go, but I'm kind of decided that I'm going to go now.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah, so me and my son are going to go there. Yeah, that's gonna be interesting for sure.
I mean, that's the core of it, right? Is that like there are locals that exist right now. They're just really low in population. And so I think everyone's kind of waiting to see when the next big party is going to occur. And that may or may not happen. Like it might be the small local that we have right now. That's the one that we grow into the big party. Um,
Yeah.
but it has been hard to get people to adopt that big party or adopt the new locals, I think.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be kind of a weird transition also because like when we went from 4 to 5, like we had a place established here locally where everybody was going to, and I think that first Street Fighter 5 tournament we had I think 59 attendees. And looking at that the tournament page for the launch tournament on Friday, I think it's at like 25 right now.
Yeah.
So that's nowhere near even half of that. Well, almost half, but even then, it's just like I feel like it's gonna be we're gonna have whatever group is there, and then it might actually start growing from there, which is kind of different because usually we have like the peak at launch, and then things kind of level out as people get weeded out for whatever reasons, like they don't want to play competitively or this is more than they expected or something like that. So I think we could see, depending on how things, how the game is and everything else, we might see, increases as we go forward, as more people find out about things and more people, hear about the locals and know about that kind of stuff.
I think a lot of it is just consistency because even from what was it, 2016? That was the year 20 Street
Hmm.
Fighter 5 came out. I
Yeah,
think locals were booming, right? Like all the fighting games are still being played. Marvel
yeah,
3 and um, Persona, and all these other games that were very hot. So, a lot of locals still had it on their schedule. They'll be like, oh, Friday night, that's where I'm going to my locals, TGZ, etc. So I think that because of the pandemic, it's really affected the consistency of locals because people aren't really ingrained or doesn't really have the idea of like, oh yeah, that's right, locals. That's gonna be on my schedule. So I think
yeah.
it'll take some
Okay.
time for us to eventually get there, but yeah, I think we'll eventually get to a pretty good point, hopefully.
I think it'll be something like, because Benny, you mentioned like we, we'll how it used to be was we would start big and then we'd slim down over time, right? Because the game would get stale, or like the competition would be more static, for lack of a better phrase, and so people knew where they stood and they didn't really feel the need to challenge themselves any further. The issue that I see happening, because I'll be the one to say it, is like I think this game actually is going to do the opposite for offline. It's going to actually hurt offline because the netcode is so damn good. To the point where, and I think we talked about this last episode, the angle might not be competition anymore for offline locals. It might be more community oriented, and it might be more like a potluck, so to speak. And I think that, so we would actually, I think we would go the opposite trajectory, like Benny mentioned, where we would start small and gradually grow bigger, but it would be less so about scaring people away because it's too hardcore, and more about like start small, but then gradually people learn to trust, I guess, the event, and come out and learn how to cook food. I don't know what I would bring to your potlucks, by the way, Benny. I can't cook, man.
As long as it's not 8 people bringing different bags of chips, like I'll be good.
I'm bringing the juice.
Me and Nam have done that before. I think you and I have both brought chips once, or something like that, or like baked goods or some shit.
Yeah, it's the easiest choice. I'll bring the napkins and the forks. How about that?
Yeah, that could work. Okay, that's why we'd have like a sign-up sheet, just to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
End up with 6 bags of Doritos and like, come on, guys, like, get some like pre-made strudels or something, coffee cake, something.
Yeah. And so Nam, like you mentioned that the local community feels really important to you. Would it be enough if it wasn't a tournament? It was just a gathering.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think even in Street Fighter, you guys know that I may have competed in a Street Fighter, but I didn't really like jump into it. I didn't dive into it like super deep and was super competitive in Street Fighter, because I ended up being competitive in other games like Marvel. So I only showed up just to hang out, really. So honestly, like, it doesn't even have to be competitive. We could just all hang out and play casuals, and that could be a great time in of itself.
I guess the other thing I didn't think about also was the influx of like new players, right? It's like there's a lot of us that have been establishing this scene for 10 years, right? We've made friends, we know people. And while I do kind of agree that, online is going to be big, and, it's going to be, netcode's going to benefit that a lot. The offline could be kind of the bridge to finding people to play online as well. You know what I mean? Like, we have the Facebook group, people could find that. Oh, you guys are doing a potluck, or you guys are doing whatever team tournament or something like that offline. Hey, let me go meet some of these guys that live in this scene. Now all of a sudden you got somebody else locally that you could play that maybe you didn't know about, because somebody else in AZ jumps online and they see Porter John, they're not going to know who the hell that is unless they were tuning into our podcast or know about our locals before.
Sure.
But then if they meet you in person and they're like, oh, you're that guy, I've seen you online all the time, or whatever.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. It's like a couple episodes back I mentioned that for 5 at least, and I like Marvel scene's actually a better example of this. For Marvel, right, our scene was strong and it had a lot of different people pushing it, but I do think that the fact that Armando and Sean did so well, like out of state, really pushed a lot of us to like want to practice just as hard as they could, just as hard as they did. I don't think I practiced as hard as Armando and Sean, but I think I felt compelled to try, because it's like, hey, these guys are from our scene, they're like on our team in a lot of ways, and that success kind of, what's that thing, rising tide pushes all boats upward or some shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Boom.
Yep, exactly.
So I feel like there is going to be a value in like saying, if one of us does really well in an online tournament, being like, hey, we're from Arizona, and then that could turn into the conversation of, oh, where do you practice at? And could be in Gilbert at a potluck, or a contender, or the gaming zone, right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I've always, maybe this is just Arizona pride speaking, but I felt like Arizona has always had very strong players throughout different games, and just speaking in experience for Marvel, I'll appear on streams or at different tournaments or whatever, and then I'll eventually get DMs or people replying back to me on Twitter, and they're like, "Hey, like I'm really interested. Like, I noticed that you're from AZ. Like, where can I get casuals in AZ?" I've had this before, and
Yeah.
I've directed people to like whatever local is happening at the time,
Yeah.
and etc. So
Yeah, like if it's Tekken, then you send them to Sean or Steven, right? And if it's Street Fighter, you send them to me or Mike at this time. And or if it's Third Strike, you send them to the Third Strike community. They have their own Discord and whatnot too, right?
Yeah, running the Cactus League and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
But like that's the thing is like there's just people, just knowing people in your individual scene and knowing where the casuals are. But I don't know. There's also like it could be like early days for 4. It was there is this pretty picture we paint that everybody was playing together, but like there still were like cliques that practiced together. Like the West Side all practiced together, and then Tempe all practiced together, but we would come together at a big tournament and then face off, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like for 6 at least there's a subset of players I think that won't be willing to come out to offline locals, but will be willing to play online and only online, and it's going to be interesting, I think, as far as like, because we would all communicate the same way together just over Discord or something. So there's going to be online players and there's going to be offline Arizona players.
I mean, why go offline when your Wi-Fi connection is just going to be as good, right?
Yes, that is the latest the latest gossip, I think, is that Street Fighter 6 the review embargo ended. That's why the Metacritic score's up there and everything. And it was a video review, I believe, that showed that there was a Wi-Fi indicator, and they did indeed confirm that. The reviewer did. No statement from the official company or anything like that, or from the devs. So my take on that is like they know it, they put it in there, but they didn't want to advertise it because of the controversy around it, and that controversy is very real.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I at this point, it's like if you told people beforehand that was gonna, ostracize some people already, right? And then like you put it in afterwards, and it's like I saw somebody posting about like, well, I've already pre-ordered this game and I paid for it, so if this becomes a problem, I might get a refund. And I'm like, well, I don't know. It's like at this point, like, we're not going to get super technical about the wired versus Wi-Fi debate, but it's just, it's one of those things. Like at this point, like I don't, there's alternatives to being able to play wired that are much better than being on Wi-Fi. And like I get people's concerns, but at the same time, it's just like it's always funny to see people be like, well, I've never had connection problems, and I was like, that might be how it appears to you, but to the other person, you're jumping around, you're teleporting and doing stuff that you're not supposed to, and it's not a fun experience.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is just like having the option to not play them,
Mm-hmm.
because like apparently there's that story that's been floating around that NuckleDu and Mike Ross played from across the seas. NuckleDu is somewhere in Florida, Central Florida, and Mike Ross is all the way in Singapore right now. And
Mm-hmm.
lo and behold, Mike Ross was on Wi-Fi the whole time. They said the connection was good, so clearly there's grounds that there can be a good connection against Wi-Fi players. But as long as you can choose to just like, oh, they're on Wi-Fi, let's run the set and see how it goes. And if it doesn't go well, then you can always either refuse to play them, or you can blacklist them, or you can refuse to even accept the match to begin with. Like there's just a whole bunch of options, and I think because the netcode is so good that I think this will eventually become a non-issue once the game gets released. The only time I can think of when it was like really bad was I think it appeared in Tekken, right? And Tekken was like, well, we're not gonna give you rollback, but we'll let you know if you're playing against someone that's on Wi-Fi, and that's their their solution, which was not really a solution to begin with.
Yeah.
But you'll find out that a lot of people play on Wi-Fi.
It's a bit of a passive aggressive solution, because I remember it was like Harada at the time was very much about being like, you know, the netcode is part of it, but like everybody's own individual network connections are an enormous part of it. And so rather than fix our netcode, we're going to show you with the Wi-Fi indicator just how poorly other people's setups are optimized for, and that they play Wi-Fi. And that is a, to me, that's a like, no, it's your problem. And frankly, I would probably make the same choice as the developers. I'd be like, you guys don't understand. But yeah, it's also like a good representation of like accessibility problems. It's another like accessibility issue, I think, where, you know, a lot of people, the stories I'm reading on internet comments and whatnot, just to give a voice to that side of the argument, you know, it's that your living arrangement might not actually allow you to do Ethernet, like to do like a physical cable. Like, what if you've got like a really shitty landlord? What if you are very young and your parents aren't going to let you run a cable and it's a tripping hazard? You know, there's a lot of like legit reasons, I think, and that it's like, you know, at what point do we are we being exclusionary? But I kind of stand with you guys in that regard, where it's like there's a line here where it's like your experience is impacting my experience, and I can choose to not allow for that to happen, which is unfortunate. And in the mix with all that is all this conversation about whether or not it's technically possible and advances in Wi-Fi technology and stuff like that. That's all a bunch of smoke. Just the nature of the connection is that it's going to be unstable at times because it's wireless.
Yeah, I think it's a super big shame. I think as long as we're not like witch hunting like the Wi-Fi players to gatekeep people, because, you know, obviously, again, like not everyone has the ability to have a wired connection. But yeah, at the same time, I think that, you know, once you have the option, and you could I've seen the people posted about the tournaments, like they're banning people on Wi-Fi. I'm not that's also one of those lines where I'm like, like people who are wireless are gatekept from this tournament, but at the same time, like the integrity of the online connection is being kept. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah. Well, the way I look at it is like there has to be like a standard in terms of like when it comes to competition, right? Like you know, because you're affecting you're affecting the experience of everybody involved. So, you know, you don't, you know, and I'd rather exclude those people that are on Wi-Fi if it means that the people that want to play and that are on good solid connections are going to have a bad experience, or if they're going to have a bad experience if those people are playing.
For me, it's if there's money on the line, and there is on pretty much all these. Like, because of that, like it's that is what forces the integrity conversation into the limelight. If it was a free tournament, you know, and it was just like a casual thing, then you know, let it rock. You know, it might suck and ruin somebody's day because they perform poorly in a bracket, but you know, it's not gonna, the results don't matter as much compared to if the money's on the line, because we also know that there's going to be a million fucking tournaments for this game every day. Everyone's going to try to get in on that, you know?
Yeah. And you bring up a good point about the online tournaments, because that's a big part of the Capcom Pro Tour. So, you know, for those kind of online premieres and stuff that they're going to have, or, you know, a spot in the Capcom Pro Tour or the Capcom Cup is on the line, like, you know, imagine losing and then finding out that the person's on Wi-Fi. Like, at least now it's just like, well, this person's here. Like, he's had a dodgy connection, you know, with multiple people that he's tried playing with. Like, you know, he shouldn't be able to play. Like, it you know, it's not a good look.
I mean, if we let's take the scenario and take it offline, right, and make an analogy with there, where like, what if I had a stick that periodically paused the game?
Yeah. Exactly. Or cause some kind of performance issue, right? Like, you know, just cause the system to slow down for some reason. Like it was doing some kind of, I don't know, some polling check or some weird thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's going to be a lot of match arena prize pools too. I think it's going to be.
Oh yeah,
There's always going to be money on the line.
yeah,
Yeah. I don't. So I don't see it. I don't see it like a solid solution for this. And frankly, if you're playing on Wi-Fi and you're not willing to, and you're willing to like enter tournaments and play competitively, um, I don't know. I don't see a lot of overlap between those two crowds either. And if, because again, if you're super serious about it, you would also want to play on Ethernet anyway.
exactly.
It's hard. It's because every Street Fighter release has this problem, right? It's not just the Wi-Fi thing. It's the hardcore versus casual audience arguing over who owns Street Fighter at the end of the day, right? And I've actually come to like in 2009, I walked away thinking, well, the competitive scene owns Street Fighter, and then Street Fighter 5 came out, and it didn't have all the stuff that the casuals liked, and that game tanked. And so now I'm like, I think the casuals actually own Street Fighter. Maybe we should start catering to them a little bit more. And that's what this game is.
Yeah,
It's all the Wi-Fi warriors, that they make up a good chunk of the sales there.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, the casual fans I mean that's always been a talk too, in terms of like Mortal Kombat being like one of the biggest fighting game sales is, there's a lot of stuff for the casual player, the single player content, that kind of stuff, which for a competitor, like a lot of us don't really necessarily care about that kind of stuff really. But there's a lot of other people that do, and it's just like that's a big part of the company's audience, and the sales, which is ultimately what matters to them. Like they don't care how many people enter whatever tournament. Like it's how many units can we push out the door, and how do we satisfy the people that have bought the game.
Yeah. Speaking of people that have bought the game, though, there another thing that rolled out. Details that rolled out were that there's a battle pass in the game,
Yep.
and that battle pass, I believe that the background music. This is a headline on Kappa, I think. The background music is actually locked behind the paid version of that battle pass.
Ooh.
So like not like the default background music that we were hearing in the beta, but like new tracks and stuff, and that. If there's one complaint that a lot of people have about this game is that they don't like the soundtrack of the game, and everyone's like, well, that's okay. We'll just play all the old classic themes and stuff like that. But if they're gated behind money, it's like, and apparently it's a battle pass that rotates monthly. So, we're basically signing up for an MMO subscription if we want to like get all that stuff. So in a lot of ways, like, they know that they're appealing to casuals, but they're also appealing to the hardcore that are willing to spend a monthly fee on Street Fighter 6.
Yeah.
What's your guys' impression of the battle pass, by the way? Is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal? What do you think?
Go ahead first, Nam.
I don't know. I feel like, I mean, I'm just used to like battle pass being like what, just costumes and stages and DLC characters, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think that's fine, but if it was just that, but then you're saying like music or
It's
this
like
being,
avatar items and stickers and emotes and music.
I guess those still seem pretty supplementary. If I actually don't remember if I'm mistaken on this. Did Street Fighter 5 have separate songs that you have to buy? Am I wrong on that?
Uh,
I don't think that's
no.
just
right.
I think it was just the costumes.
Okay.
They
I think it's the
definitely
costumes
released.
and like the online profile stuff or whatever.
There's definitely a music pack that got released, but I think it got bundled in with Arcade Edition. So technically, you paid money for those songs. But
okay.
yeah, I think that's actually something I hear a lot. Is that this is kind of par for the course for 2023 video game anyway. So it's not worth getting outraged over.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, because like in the last 5 years I played Fortnite for a couple of years. I played Call of Duty. I've been playing Hearthstone, and all of those games now incorporate a battle pass, and it's I've just come to the point to where again it's part of gaming nowadays, and like I don't really have necessarily outrage about it, just because of the fact like it is supplemental stuff. Like it's not core to the gameplay experience as long as it's not like, oh, well, unlock this super for super for Ryu or whatever. As long as it's not stuff like gameplay changing stuff, like I don't really have a have a care for it. I know people will have FOMO about whether it's costumes or something, and just be like, oh, how'd you get that costume? Oh, well, it's level 80 in the battle pass, and you know. I'll admit there's been situations like that with Fortnite where I'm just like, oh, this looks cool, but I was just like, but do I want to buy the battle pass for this? Am I going to play this that much? And I guess in some ways, Street Fighter kind of gets a pass because, for me at least, because I'm going to play this a lot. My son's going to be on my account playing this a lot, so I'm not worried about the accumulation of like leveling up and unlocking stuff as I would in other games where I kind of felt forced to kind of log in and do my daily challenges and unlock stuff and level up. This is a game that pretty much is going to get a ton of play probably in the next 3 to 5 years or longer, however long it's out. So whatever needs to be unlocked, I'm pretty sure it's going to get unlocked at some point.
I've always been a big fan of free to play, and I don't mean like like you get to play and then unlock characters or anything like that. I know like DLC characters need to be bought, but for things like colors and stuff like that, like the more you play, you accumulate in-game currency, and then you buy that kind of stuff. I think that I've always been a big fan of that. But if you're doing battle pass to unlock or like kind of like bypass some of these things, that's fine. But if it's just kind of like again like songs that you can't get unless you buy it, then I don't know. Avatars and emotes are just super like secondary. Like I don't even think about using any of those.
Yeah.
I actually I do take some like I went through a stint where I played all the free-to-play games that were the FGC was big on at the time. Specifically, I played Multiversus and Rumbleverse, and both of them have that same kind of like free-to-play model with the battle pass and all that other stuff and the dailies and stuff.
Yeah.
And I really didn't like it because I felt guilted into playing the game to maximize the dailies and stuff, and like I had to play a specific way, which is the opposite of the player expression thing that everybody wants in fighting games. And obviously I can choose to ignore it and stuff, but like I don't want to I like the game well enough already. I don't want to feel guilted into playing it. I want a different reason to play this game. I want to play the game because it's fun and I want to keep playing it, not because I'm unlocking something. I risk not unlocking something. That's the actual predatory part, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I could see that. Yeah, because there's been like you don't want to feel obligated to play every day or log in every day, because like I know that's been a thing in some other games that I've played where it's like we have a daily thing for like the whole month, and if you miss one day, you forget to log in, like you don't get that thing for the month, and it's Street Fighter Duel, man. That is
mobile games.
Yeah.
Mobile games.
So that's a big thing in terms of that.
And the big thing is like we are paying money for this game. Like I paid like I bought the deluxe edition. I think that's like $100 or close to it. It's like for the colors and stuff being locked behind a battle pass for free to play, that makes sense. But for this, it's like the last game that I think that tried that was actually is Overwatch 2 free?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, I don't know because I have a Game Pass and it was on Game Pass, so.
Because I know a lot of people really disliked what they did to Overwatch, which is they just added another character and then made it 6v6 or something instead, and then they added a battle pass to it and made it shitty. And it makes sense to me why this was not marketed to us. It wasn't marketed to anybody. It was just it's kind of in there. It got slipped in with some of the reviews, but it's very clear that the reviewers didn't even intend to say that stuff. Because I think the screenshots from like it's in Spanish, so I think it's probably a South American or something. Reviewer was just like, here's a picture of it. I don't know. I don't like it. It bothers me.
Overwatch 2 is free to play, by the way.
Overwatch 2 is free to play?
Yeah, I just looked it up.
Okay.
I mean, this is an interesting point because I didn't think about that either in terms of like, when it came to games like that, right? Whether it's Hearthstone or Fortnite, right? Those were free to play, and I got to choose whether I was going to invest money in it. Whereas this game, like, again, like, I bought like the Ultimate Edition for like whatever $80 or whatever, and there's other stuff within the game that now I'd have to buy to unlock, which is adding on to that cost. Which is a different ball game instead of it being free to play and be like, hey, do you want these costumes? Do you want these extra soundtracks or background music or whatever?
Yeah. It's hard because I get the argument that like, hey, this is just the way things are now.
Yeah.
But like, it's kind of reminds me of what Scott was saying about the input lag stuff, which is like, if we don't like say that we don't like this stuff, then nothing's ever going to change,
Yeah.
Granted, that's very different than arguing against a bunch of business interests. that's what this is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I Street Fighter V had dailies as well, and they were relatively unintrusive.
Yeah.
Because
I remember those. Yeah, yeah. You're right, because they had those things where you'd have to go play the whatever mode, or you'd have to go play some casual matches or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just I don't think it's gonna personally affect me too much. I'm not gonna make a big deal about it personally.
Mm.
But I could definitely see where people, kind of have a negative outlook on it, or
Yeah. To me, that's the only strike I've seen in this game, against this game rather. Everything else is pretty godlike. It's on track to becoming my favorite Street Fighter game.
I haven't played very much of it, but I can see how it can become like one of the strongest Street Fighters to be made.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, now as somebody who hasn't had a lot of exposure to the game, like what's the thing that's most exciting about it to you?
I think the most exciting thing so far has been the mechanics, the system mechanics, because I just finally got my hands on it a little bit in the open beta a couple weekends ago. And I was only playing with like a couple characters or whatever, but I was noticing that I know Drive Impact was like a thing, but it is a thing. But I believe it's called Drive Rush, right? When you hold the parry and dash,
Yeah.
or you dash cancel, that opens up a lot. Like it opens up a whole ton of things, and I only just realized that like raw Drive Rush is only one bar into
Yes.
a normal, and it's like better frames.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually makes the game a lot faster than any other Street Fighter games really would be, because people are just like constantly trying to take turns or trying to steal turns like from mid range and get in there, and the whole point is to really burn out your opponent's drive gauge too. So I think that there's a lot of potential with that as well. With punishing into like a hit confirm, that's crazy. Like, yeah, it makes Street Fighter not like a super boring game. And I mean this in like just like a casual perspective,
Yeah.
because you're sitting there and you're just like, okay, so these two players are walking around and they're just trying to whiff punish each other with stand medium kick. Cool. But then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, what if the one stand medium kick turns into like a third of your health? Into a
Yeah.
corner carry? That's kind of cool. That really like gets the people going when we're watching, or even when I'm playing too.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the most interesting thing to me so far. And learning characters is probably the other thing for me, because I really do enjoy like learning characters, at least at a casual level. Like in every fighting game, I always do every trial, every character trial. Yeah, for the most part, as long as it's there. So in like Street Fighter Five, I'll do like every character trial, except they kept updating and adding more trials, and I just kind of fell off with that. But yeah, that's kind of been one of my like my thing. So I've always like pride myself in being able to like do these combos that they throw at you. So it's super fun to me to at least learn how characters operate within the trial system, and I do hope that they have that at least.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, that's what I was gonna jump into first. Is like I kind of like to see like what the developers are trying to look at, or give you like kind of like a basis for you to work with, and to kind of understand like, oh, this works. Okay, so what can I do off of this instead? Can I do a heavy? Can I do, what can I juggle off of this? Those kind of situations.
Yeah, like I may never play Dhalsim ever, but I would like to see how Dhalsim combos works in trial mode and see like how he moves and feels, because you never know, like, especially with competitive players, um, you might just find somebody you like just really randomly, because
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I like the way this character feels just off of the combos alone, and sometimes you can pick them up that way too.
Yeah.
I think trials, like just in any fighting game, not just six, like including in four as well, like they represent a way to try a character out without feeling like, not arcade mode where like you're like committed to this long slog to fight a boss at the end, and the CPU's throwing themselves at you the whole time and you're not don't have time to think, but you still want something objective based, to kind of tell you, to pat you on the back when you play the character right.
Yeah.
I think that's like a really nice, like low committal way of attracting players and making them try new styles. Really, I think World Tour is going to do the same thing, man. Like
Yeah.
once you get all the master moves and stuff like that, people will like want to try these different things, and they're going to want their busted combination like SPD and teleport or something. But
Yeah, supposedly I saw something that just said that you could bring your custom character in the trading mode, so I'm expecting to see some kind of randomness and be like, what is this?
yeah, I mean, you could bring them online too. You can fight them in the, like, you can put your two created characters next to each other in the battle hub and fight it out there.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, like the center area that in the beta, it's like it doesn't do anything, but in the in the real game, like it'll, that center area is for created characters and they can just fight.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
I think that's really cool. I think that's super busted and fun, and I feel like there's going to be creative character tournaments and finding out who can break the game first.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing that you mentioned that, because I'm sure that there's just gonna be so many like tournaments, but at the same time, to differentiate yourself, you could also like have tournaments where it's like come with your own character, or with the fun modes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
stream
I think
battle,
that's, yeah, it's just gonna be funny, because the community is gonna come with some crazy looking characters.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's going to
So-
be, it's going to go viral on social media, like the freaks of nature that people are making.
Yeah.
I think I saw someone make actual Samuel L. Jackson, and then they posted the recipe for him and everything too.
That's awesome. Yeah. So one thing, we got some. Well, I think I don't know if it was feedback or something in the chat. Just like we talk about Street Fighter a lot on this podcast, because that's mine and John's kind of basis of competitive gameplay. But you've been big in the Marvel community, and one thing I wanted to talk to you about was recently you went to a big tournament this past weekend, Combo Breaker, and did you enter Marvel?
I did. Yeah.
You did? Oh, okay, so I was curious about kind of how that scene is looking nowadays, because it is a game at Evo, like an official game at Evo.
Mhm.
So I was kind of curious about how the scene's looking right now, and in terms of like the players, and who do you think's like the best players at this point, and basically that kind of situation.
Oh man, I have a lot to say about Marvel for this year, that's for sure. Where to begin? Um, I think that the game is pretty healthy, and it's really, really active. Obviously, like the game never stopped being active. It just
Yeah,
wasn't really in the limelight. So
yeah,
this kind of goes to show you that the announcement at Evo being a main game like means so much for the community, for every community that it ever gets. So sometimes like when a game doesn't get announced, like it just instantly, like, for lack of better word, like dying out. And obviously
hmm
it's not dying out, because the community will always run events and stuff like that, and the whole parsec is holding it alive. But now that Evolution was announced, Combo Breaker had 190 entrants,
oh,
and I can't even remember the last time Marvel 3 broke 100, or even came close to like 120 or 150 in any given year, like even pre-pandemic, like past 2017
yeah,
Evolution. Yeah, I can't think of any event that had that many entrants. And this kind of attributes to a lot of players coming back. So I saw a lot of players that I haven't seen in years come out of the woodworks. Just come out of nowhere. I've also seen a lot of new players too, and that's exactly what we call them, the Parsec era players.
Okay.
So just like in any fighting game, the pandemic had it was also kind of a blessing in disguise, where people were able to discover other fighting games, and they're like, well, if I'm just gonna be on my computer all day, I might as well hop online and play video games and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different new different players that are now playing Marvel 3 as well, and people are like really, really motivated to become the best. Because yes, that was a thing, but now winning Evo doesn't net you like, a couple thousand. Winning Evo is like easy, like 20,000 or something like that, right? With the 25K
Mhm.
pop bonus. So that's been becoming a pretty big thing, and I don't know if I'm like trying to get back into it, but after my performance at Combo Breaker, I made it out of pools,
Nice.
Mhm.
and I did relatively well for someone who hasn't practiced. This always gets me. I'm always like, I'm gonna drown, and then I'm like, oh, actually, I did kind of well for not practicing. What if I did practice?
Yeah.
Yep, and that's a hypothetical. What if I did practice? I might do well. But yeah, I think the best player right now, in my opinion, his name is Jabril.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you may have heard of his name, make
Yep.
quite a few rounds lately, because Jabril has been the most consistent player to have won tournaments, um, like over the past couple years at any
Yeah.
tournament that he's at. Um, but lately, there's been a very big, I wouldn't call it upset, but just a new development. And there's a new player named Liberal Terminator, young kid. He's like 18. Came
Hmm.
out of womb, started playing Marvel right away. Yeah. And this kid plays unlike anything else I've ever seen. Very impressive. If the team dynamic means anything to you, it's Nova Doom Spencer, or
Mm.
Nova Spencer
Okay.
Doom. It's a relatively, strong team, but
It's a stable team.
it's a very stable team. But he's playing at a speed that is unrivaled. He plays very fast, and no one else can. I wouldn't say no one, but not a lot of people can play as fast as he does. But when you play quick in
Okay.
Marvel, you suffer precision,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But somehow this kid has found a way to do both, and
Mm.
he can move at a like lightning speed, but still land at a very precise angle. So it's now he's really pushing the boundaries of the characters, and he won Combo Breaker. In
Yeah.
fact, not only did he win Combo Breaker, he beat Jabril to win Combo
Oh.
Breaker.
Wow.
So now the story gets spicy, because now it's like, oh, okay, well, is Jabril the best player? Is he gonna win Evo? Will Liberal Terminator win Evo? Will someone else win Evo?
Okay.
So it's the story has been put where it's kind of like Jabril has been the best, but in my opinion, I feel like, he felt like he wasn't really challenged.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like it doesn't feel like there was any consequences for him to play at his fullest potential, or very clean.
Yeah. I mean,
But
that's yeah.
yeah,
That's no.
so
Yeah. I was just pulling up the result. Yeah. I saw that. Yeah. He was Liberal Terminator was first, and then Ray Ray was second, and then like yeah, he had beaten Jabril on the way there.
mhm.
No, that's cool though, because it's like as the as the top dog, you say Jabril was the best player for the last few years. Yeah, if you're not challenged, sometimes maybe you lose that motivation. Maybe you don't train as hard. Maybe you kind of rest on your laurels, and the mix ups and the stuff that you've been doing have been working. So it's like, I don't really kind of have to push myself. So who knows? This could be the catalyst to do that. You know what I mean? That might have been like, oh well, okay, now it's time to wake up. There's other people out there that are playing better than me.
Yeah, he's definitely on notice for sure, and I think everyone else too, because they're kind of tired of the same person winning over and over again.
Yeah.
And trying to stay on top is pretty difficult, because you're not really like learning a lot of lessons when you're winning, as
Hmm.
opposed to like, oh, I made these mistakes when I lost, and you kind of work on them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think from now till Evo, there's still CEO in about a month, I'd say,
Oh yeah.
a few weeks. So there's that, and then Evo, and then we'll see where we go from there. I think a lot of players are really gunning it, because like that we all feel like it's like our final year, like our definitive final year.
Yeah.
Like we thought 2017 was our final year, but this time it feels like very definitive because we were brought back, and we're labeled as the what is it, the throwback tournament or the retro
Yeah.
tournament.
Yeah. I think it was a
Um,
throwback. Yeah.
yeah, so that means that there won't be Marvel won't appear again, since it's considered a throwback tournament, and there's
Yeah.
just so much money on the line.
I'm gonna talk some shit here, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So whenever I hear about a game dying, or when a scene goes dormant, there's always a core competitive scene that sticks around and keeps playing it. But a lot of times the best players quit or they move on, and so the game stays the same. And so I don't want to call out any particular scenes here, but there are scenes out there that are like, they have a small dedicated community, and then every now and then Justin Wong will enter a tournament and fuck them all up. Right? And so
Yeah.
I am asking kind of from as an outsider and as somebody that used to play Marvel, and I believe that I played it at the height of competition. Is that an accurate belief? Has the game continued to evolve? Was Jabril not challenged because the game was stale, or because I guess are these new players, are they that good? That's the question. Could they beat Heyday Filipino champ and Heyday Justin Wong?
This is a very interesting topic because I literally was in a group discussion at like 4 in the morning at Combo Breaker, to ask, can peak Justin Wong beat the peak new player now, or like one of the new, like we call him Parsec era again. That's a very good question because the meta has shifted. It hasn't like super shifted. It's not like a completely different game, but there's a lot of things that maybe Justin Wong might not be prepared for. There's also like a huge influx of meta teams. So for example, Justin Wong may not be very um, experienced with the Morgan Phoenix shell. And
That's
if
a new
you
shell. Yeah.
that's a relatively new shell because really the only one piloting it at the time was Ryan LV.
Who also
Yeah.
was kind of a late bloomer in the game, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
Let me take that a step further then, because when we think of like these legacy games that have had a resurgence, the big three in my mind are Smash Melee, Third Strike, and Marvel 3. Like if I take
Yeah.
let's take that at face value and say that the scene continued to grow in skill level, right? And say that Marvel 3 continued to grow in skill level. Say that Mundank or Liberal Terminator or this new Parsec generation, right, could beat the older generation. The thing about Third Strike and Smash, in my mind, and this might get me in some hot water too, those games to me seem solved. There's always new players picking them up on Parsec or on Fightcade or on Slippy, right? But the tiers don't change. The meta evolves slightly, but by and large, it's the same people that are continuing to win. And so my ask for Marvel is, you mentioned that the meta had shifted. Has it shifted so drastically? Is the game still evolving?
Yes, I would actually say the game is still evolving and it still has room for more growth as the game continues, for sure, because these some of the top tier characters just have huge ceilings that are not really tapped into. Even now, like when I watch like Liberal Terminator, for example, like I felt like what he's been doing consistently has only been something that other Nova players rarely ever do. I'll give an example. I mean, he's very good at doing speed tackles, and you know how speed tackle works, right? You kind of move around and maneuver, but you can actually maneuver in a way where you can like cross them up. But it's so fast, like you have to do it and you have to do it precisely. So um, before that, like not a lot of players were doing that because I think that before the meta or at least the game style, the gameplay style was that you wanted to play a lot of neutral. You want to make sure that you are relatively on the safe side and um, make sure that your risks are like well placed. Like you don't want to be taking risk all the time. But
Mm.
nowadays, it's all about taking your turn and continuing to take your turn. And I think that we had a really lengthy conversation before. It's kind of like the KBR style. And when you watch KBR, 99 seconds, it's like, okay, well, it's not really my turn. And then KBR decides to bring it up a notch and, um, use every resource possible to continue to stay in there, to continue to get that turn. Because in Marvel, with one character down, the momentum is essentially yours, as long
Yeah.
as you have, a very solid set play mix up. So I think that's kind of like where a lot of these new players are at, is where they're burning their resources early to be able to keep up the momentum, and they'll do anything like anything necessary, because it's teams are kind of more on the front heavy side.
It's
So
Gotcha.
fascinating,
yeah,
actually, because like that was how we played in the 2010s. Really was we played defensively often because we were scared of the X Factor comeback. And am I
Mm.
am I reading this right? And that are you saying that like the new gen isn't scared of X Factor?
in a way, you could say that, because if your set play is good enough, what is Virgil gonna do on incoming? He has to block like the
Mm.
rest of everyone else. He doesn't have a double jump.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a reversal super. Whatever it is, like the set play is powerful, and this goes for any anchor characters too, because the flow has not changed. If there's an anchor character you're afraid of, you snap him out, and if they get the hit with X Factor 2 or whatever it is,
Yeah.
they earned it. Like you just let that go. But the tech has evolved in a way where it's just like, if you're incoming, it's very difficult to get out. Even Phoenix there's a lot of like anti-Phoenix tech too,
Yeah.
because of the influx of the new Moragine shell. Is that people need to be prepared just in case that there is a level 5 Phoenix on the way.
So this
Ah,
game
okay.
is both. It's both evolved and refined.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's
Very
that's
dangerous.
fascinating. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's because someone that's watched the game a lot. I played it competitively here and there. It wasn't very good, but yeah, somebody that's watched it, I can definitely understand like the defensive style. Like I remember a lot of it was like neutral projectiles, assist, and waiting for somebody to kind of make a mistake or whiff or something, and then it's just like, oh, I caught this. Then it's time to start playing the game.
Yeah.
Then it eventually went to, okay, now I got to prepare for the anchor. So to kind of hear that, people are kind of pushing the limit, to the front and just saying, hey, I'm
Yeah.
going to take my turns and I'm going to establish the pace and I'm not worried about your anchor character anymore or as much. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean it's very reminiscent of Dragon Ball Fighters, actually, I want to say,
Mm.
because if you guys ever watched Dragon Ball Fighters, there was a meta where I would say maybe season two. Turns out that the Japanese players started sparking a lot earlier. And why were they sparking so much earlier on the defensive spark? It's because they actually wanted to keep the third character, or like their entire team, alive, because
Mm.
the team falls apart the moment you start losing characters.
Yeah.
And vice versa is the same, is that they started burning sparking to do a touch of death on any of the characters that they would hit touch, because they knew if you lose a character, then it's really hard to come back.
Yeah.
Even with like one character, like full sparking or whatever you want to call it, like it's not the same like with a full team. The synergy is all gone. So
Yeah.
in my opinion, that's how team based games should be played, at the highest levels, at the highest levels.
Yeah. Yeah, watching, somebody that's watched Dragon Ball too, like, yeah, seeing those comebacks from single characters, like, those were like legit comebacks. Like, you don't have
Yeah,
any assists. There's no,
yeah,
sparking is nowhere near like the thing that X Factor level 3 was, right? You see Virgil come in and like your life is gone and nothing. Like, you'd
yeah,
have to see that single character in Dragon Ball, get the hit, do a combo, do like a third damage, and like, okay, now I got to do this again now I got to do this again, and then I got to do this to another character, and like, yeah, those comebacks were long and hard fought. So when they did happen, like,
Hmm.
yeah, those were big deals.
Well earned. And I'm not saying that, level 3 Dark Virgil isn't running wild. Like, it still happens. That's just
Yeah,
because Marvel is a high variance game, right?
yeah,
Anything could go wrong at any given time. You could just be off by a little bit, or he could just slip, actually like block you out and do, dimension slash or whatever, and then you just get hit cross up, or, just there's a lot of things that could happen. But still, it's equalizing a lot of the anchor factor for sure.
nice.
So does this mean that Sea Viper is finally going to be top tier? Theory Viper is finally realized by the Parsec generation.
Oh man,
You see Viper balls everywhere.
Unfortunately, we're not in 20XX yet. Yeah, we're not there. People still believe that there are some people who still believe that Sea Viper is in theory like a top 3 character, but nobody right now is like a theory player, because there's a lot of like theory fighters and lab monsters, but they are just that, like they're not also somebody who performs really well in tournament, because we all know like how tournament characters work.
Yeah, it's not just about tier placement, it's about stability and the ability to reproduce the results that make them strong.
Mm-hmm.
And how consistent that is. I've been thinking about that lately with Street Fighter 6, where I'm like, the character I play is really, really difficult at times, and sometimes I just want to throw loop. Sometimes that's just way easier.
Yeah.
How about? Is there going to be? Do you think there's any going to be any crossover between Marvel 3 and Street Fighter 6? Because you mentioned like this is the end for them in a lot of ways. Do you think that that the scene's going to keep playing 3, or are they going to move to different games? Are they going to stop playing games?
I think when I said is this going to be the end, I think I was being a little dramatic. I think this is just going to be the final time that we get to have the big main stage exposure.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think Marvel 3 will really move out of the regular tournament limelight. I think that tournaments like CEO and Combo Breaker and all the other ones will still have Marvel.
Yeah.
Okay.
As for the crossover, I think it's a Capcom game. I've talked to a bunch of players this weekend. We all asked each other if we're playing Street Fighter 6, which means there's interest in Street Fighter 6. So I think like any new like really big fighting games that come out, I think there will be a good amount of crossovers. And I gotta remind some people that Marvel players are pretty good at Street Fighter. I'm not gonna lie. People might not remember that, but there have been some pretty strong placings with Marvel players. I think Ray beat Daigo one year in one of the big tournaments, and there's been other pretty strong placers too. So I expect to see a lot of them.
I mean, with that prize pool too. I mean, if you're a competitive pro player, like I don't know who's pulling the strings necessarily, but I can, I would think that certain sponsors would be like, "Hey, you need to get into this too." Like, with if for nothing else than the exposure of being, in that scene.
Yeah, and plus it's just a new game. I think everyone's just excited to play something new. And it's also super fun to be able to play, even if you're not like, let's say like if I wasn't as close to the Street Fighter scene, I could still always ask like my Marvel friends to play Street Fighter 6. Like again, like everyone has their own groups, their own training partners and stuff like that. So um, I think it's just gonna appeal to everyone. I mean, at the beginning at least.
I think that what's cool about 6 is that there's a lot of expression with how drive meter is used. And
yeah.
Do you? I know this is really hard to tell, but if you could pick one thing that you think Marvel players are going to do in 6, like whether it's an attack, a character they play, or a drive mechanic, like what do you think that Marvel players are going to do the most when they pick up 6 compared to other players?
I think they will definitely lab offensive situations. I think a lot of them will like Kimberly. I think that's probably a big given. And then it's certainly gonna be how to take your turn. Um, in like the drive rush, I think would definitely be very interesting for them because it's movement option. I think that's
It's a wave dash. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a wave dash. You could obviously like stuff it, but there's a lot of different mind games that goes along with it. You could like dash forward and parry or something, or dash forward DP, or
Yeah.
there's a bunch of possibilities that you could go with. And I think that's what really draws Marvel players, including myself, is that I've played a lot of other games and people have been like, oh, it's like Marvel adjacent, but it's not really because it's all about movement. And I think that's what really draws expression, movement, um, big damage. Well, maybe that's just me, but
It is
I
big
think
damage
that's
though. Like I think that most games, at least 5 at the end of its life cycle, and then 6 from what we saw in the open beta, like played at like high level, like most games end in 3.5 guesses, which is the same as Marvel.
yeah. I think their punishes are going to be very optimized too. I expect that out of Marvel players.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I'm gonna expect them to optimize the punishes and I'm expecting to see like the lengthy combos from those kind of players more than anything, because like I think the biggest thing and my favorite thing about this game is probably like the expression, the freedom of expression, and how you want to use your meter and how that's going to affect your playstyle, whether it's going to be defensive or offensive, or whether you want to mash drive impact and and do all that kind of stuff. Like that's it's gonna be fun to see for sure for the first few months.
I think this won't be like, just Marvel players or anything. I think one of the coolest things about Street Fighter 6 is the ability to kind of resource management, but not on your side, but also on your opponent's side as well.
Mm,
Because if they're
yeah,
low on drive meter, then you're thinking, well, do I want to take the damage, or should I start spending some supers to burn their drive meter and get them closer to burnout?
yeah,
Because burnout's a whole nother issue, a whole nother like dynamic to the game too. So
I was thinking about
yeah,
Burnout though, and it's like if there's a video game series that or a fighting game series that best rewards having your options removed for losing, it would be a Marvel game. I think.
yeah,
Like you got like Marvel players, I think are that's they're comfortable with that, like playing with less options because that happens every game. You lose
yeah.
options
yeah,
every time your point character dies.
Having a
yeah,
burnout is like akin to like losing your assist or like losing X Factor.
Yeah.
Because
yep,
now you don't have like a reversal that you can get out of jail, or um, you can't armor drive impact through a lot of things, reversal, etc., etc. There's just a whole bunch of things that's going
yeah.
on. So
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up about in terms of watching the opponent's drive meter too, because in other games there's been like the guard break meter, right? And that hasn't been in Street Fighter recently, but I could see a lot of people, kind of focusing on that drive meter and seeing where their opponent's at, like you
mhm.
said, and trying to make that decision, like, what do I do here? A lot of times in the guard break games, like you'd be pressing because you want to break that guard and get a free combo, or or I guess the other thing that's comparable would be like if you know that somebody's close to stun, you know what I mean, like
Yeah,
you're gonna press and be like, oh, let me get these few extra hits or this one jab in so I can get the stun.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's something that I think is different about Marvel is that like maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like health bars influence the neutral a lot in Street Fighter. Like the drive gauge essentially does that, where it's like if one player has more than the other, then they have to make a decision on who's going to aggress and who's going to play defensive. For Marvel, like you don't really have a state per se that changes during the match. It's kind of maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I guess because you could chip people out. But what I'm saying is that because everybody dies in one combo and everyone's that good where they can convert, there's not a lot of psychological advantage that you get from being down on life or like
Yeah.
getting your opponent down on life, right? Unless they're in chip range. So maybe I might be full of shit.
There's I will say that the probably what you're talking about in terms of resources, the biggest psychological impact is again Morgan Phoenix, is that when teams start building meter and they're running away and you're playing neutral and nothing is happening, but you're losing it at the same time because in the
Yeah.
long run, when they get closer to 5, you feel like you're on the clock. And with any traditional teams that play in Marvel, you can be playing neutral for like a minute and a half, and you could still both have all 3 of your characters, and it could be down to the wire. Or you can play against Morgan Phoenix Shell, and you feel like it's like a ticking time bomb, because if you haven't already rushed them down and they're close to 5, that's, what do you call that? That's um the game, that's the win condition is what they call it.
Yeah.
So you feel like they're closer to the win condition and you're so far from yours. So yeah.
I follow. So extra layer of resource management, I think, is going to behoove Marvel player, or like it's going to benefit Marvel players rather.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I think we're kind of low on time here, but any shout outs on the way out there, Nam?
Yeah, I want to say shout outs to Arizona. I think that we did a pretty good job at Combo Breaker. In case anyone didn't know, we had 4 Marvel players there, and all of them made it out of the pools.
Nice.
Top 48.
Nice.
So that was really good. Shout outs to the Marvel scene. Shout outs to you guys. Shout outs to Street Fighter 6 coming out. I expect to be playing games with the both of you. I actually am very excited for that.
Yeah, it's been a while since we played a game together, and I feel that way about pretty much everybody that's reached out to me recently and was like, I'm going to pick up 6. I'm going to pick up 6. There's a lot of Tekken players who are going to pick up 6 too.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And if I don't talk to you guys till then, I think Evolution will be a very fun show. Very fun experience. We'll see what's in store for there.
CEO is going to be wild too. There's going to be a lot of controversy around that.
First Street Fighter 6 tournament, everyone's going to be pointing fingers. They played the crack. They had early release.
Yeah.
Whole bunch of drama. I'm going to be the Michael Jackson popcorn eating gif.
I had one other question for you. I apologize. I know we were closing out here, but
yeah, you're good.
Are you interested in commentating at all on 6, or is that a path you want to pursue?
It is a path that I am very interested in, but I understand that it's gonna be a very long and arduous path that a lot of Street Fighter commentators have already kind of made a name for themselves, so they're like really far ahead of me. I couldn't even get into Combo Breaker commentary for Marvel, so yeah, that alone was pretty hard, and I can only imagine how rough Street Fighter 6 competitive commentary is. There's just way too many big names. In fact, all of them probably have the ability to commentate Street Fighter. Yeah, but I am interested, and if I were to tackle the potential of commentating Street Fighter 6 at bigger events, then I would have to start doing online events and start doing offline events. Though I think online events are more important than offline events, just to build my highlight reel and experience as well, and exposure. Those are definitely the big 3.
Yeah, I guess in the same way that we talked about online increasing the competitive pool for players, it does that for commentators as well, but there's a limited number of commentator spots compared to player spots.
So much more competitive. I hate to say that, yeah, but it's just so much more competitive. It's not to say that I can't commentate Street Fighter, but again, like the exposure and the opportunities is really hard too. But now that everything is online, you never know. So
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see you all at the launch. I guess it launches tomorrow night at 9 p.m. So that's June 1st at 9 p.m. Arizona time on Steam, and I think it'll probably release on the consoles around that time too. And I'm looking forward to getting games with both of y'all. To close out our show, what do I always say? It's twitch.tv/Spiral Series, youtube.com/Spiral Series, and if you search on Spotify, we are the Absolute Guard. This was episode 42. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
See ya.